Hi, Jesse. Thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to invite you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time. I believe you're much busier than I am. I believe the easiest options to start our podcast and how I usually start, I ask person who on another side of the camera to introduce before we start this one because I know you send me over a lot of the information and I'm really impressed about your profile. I'm quite curious. Ask you simple questions. Why you believe this podcast gonna be interesting for the fraud prevention people?
Well, there is a crisis of fake profiles. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been rocking democracies across the globe. It has been causing extortion, rape, murder, and other serious crimes going on all kinds of sites. I think you and I connected on LinkedIn, one of the more, I won't say prestigious, but business oriented sites. Yet, even there, you constantly, I'm sure, get these messages from questionable people. And when you respond, don't they always ask you to talk on WhatsApp? A business of trade off where leaders come out and get you to respond. Once you've responded to that WhatsApp, they may hand you off to someone else. This person came from a dating site. This person came from LinkedIn. This person came from wherever. And they literally pay each other to buy those leads. And so the conversation that you then begin to have on WhatsApp is probably not even the same criminal organization as the one that got you into the conversation. So my point is that these crimes have gone, beyond business and banking. Right now, these fraudsters are attacking you, your family, your friends, your children. And so the need to try to secure a future world becomes soberingly important. It's our government, it's our physical safety.
Yeah, it's a lot of the valid points. We're gonna touch a lot of them, and I agree with you about LinkedIn. So it's a lot messages happens. Some of them started from, "Do you want to get the voucher for some delivery service?" Some of them requested opportunity to speak with you about something, and yes, time to time they just say, "Yeah, it's maybe easy if we're gonna get catch up in other area where I'm mostly spending most of the time." WhatsApp, for example. Um, Actually, I want to hear your opinion about Telegram, like in general. What do you think about Telegram?
Well, I have noticed that when fraudsters siphon you onto services, be they Venmo, Telegram, WhatsApp, they already understand the privacy policy, right? The dispute policy. And I'll give you a little anecdote. I met my wife some 20 some years ago on Craigslist with that sort of relay dating, the email anonymous relay dating. They don't do it a lot anymore because it's dangerous. We understood that most all of those responses weren't just fake. They were dangerous, right? People were there trying to harm us. But we felt that the anonymity, the privacy that we had by controlling how other people could view our identity, right? We are anonymous until I give you my email. That protection was enough, supposedly in our heads anyway, to allow us to be safe. We relied on ourselves, we trusted ourselves. And those are actually important things. We want and need to be able to trust ourselves. We don't want to have to study or educate ourselves in how to keep ourselves safe, how to recognize a fake or dangerous profile. And the irony of this story is that however smart we thought we were 20 years ago, During COVID, we're here in New York City, not a great place to have four small children. And they closed the public schools, and we were desperate. Airbnb had closed down, and in fact, they really didn't want us even using a car on the road. Right? It was a lockdown. Um, but we had to get out of the city, and my wife decided this was her chance to be the hero. Right? She's going to step up and figure this out, get our family somewhere to stay. So she goes on to Craigslist. Well, what happens, of course, is that she finds a beautiful house. It's right on a lake. And lo and behold, the owner is, not able to use Airbnb. And boy, would he like it if somebody could rent it for the whole summer. And we would just be helping him out. And in fact, he'll give us a little discount, won't he? He's a really nice guy. Okay.
Well, sounds like a dream.
It's yes, it's too good to be what is that word? True.
Yeah.
Um so of course, the moment that she presses go on Venmo, she understands this too good to be true suddenly comes up at the back of her head. And sure enough, moments later she dials the phone number, and it was just one of those temporary Google phone numbers. Right? So she thought she had been talking to this person, and he has an American accent. He's clearly somebody that lives in the United States, and everything seemed fine. It wasn't like some weird guy in Nigeria, right? This had all the hallmarks of just being a regular person. But of course, all this person had done is predicted that COVID would take down Airbnb, and he scraped the entire site, right? Taking down every comment, every picture, and then posts them, not one, but thousands on Craigslist, right? Because we call this romance fraud, even though that's not a dating example there. But really, the most common profile fraud falls under the category of maintaining vast numbers of disposable profiles, right? So the minute this guy gets found out, the minute he gets his money, he simply turns off that fake identity and that fake email and that fake phone number, and he moves on to the next one. And this is a business. That month, my wife paid his rent. Next month, someone else will pay his rent. Naturally, I was infuriated.
Yeah, I can
Why?
imagine. I mean, this is always is a bad thing when it happens with someone from our closest family, even from friends, and like nowadays you never know. I mean, even if it looks real, sometimes you just like feel that something went wrong here, or for example, when you check one website and open another one and you see on the second one it is price lower on 10%, you just already ask yourself a question: what's the purpose, why this site have some additional discount? And you start to look on this website, realize maybe it's promotion happens, or maybe it's not legit, and you just pay for someone and you're not getting at the end anything. But if we back for a second for my original questions, like about Telegram and what you say, I quite notice. I'm not sure if it happens on WhatsApp, because I'm not using a lot of WhatsApp, because I'm originally from Russia and most of my family using Telegram, because it's the easiest options rather than WhatsApp, which blocked by government, or they try to do it like 1,000 times. It never happens. It's one of the new popular things. Someone compromise your account. They create a group of people in your, I don't know, from your address book,
Right.
and they say, I'm right now try to getting some discount, but I need votes from you guys. So you're my close friends and family. Can you just like going to this link, click this button for the 5 stars, and I getting discount? And people like, because most of the times so polite, they say, yeah, I don't mind. And what happens? They click in this button, and it's going to the website. And only one option to sign in. It's actually login through your Telegram accounts, enter your login and password. And they just
So
like,
you just fished 25 of your.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, I don't know, I'm personally using 2FA authentication, but I know a lot of the people who are not. And what do you believe the 2FA additional verification on any of the devices, is it positive or negative things?
I think generally speaking, these things need to progress forward. I think the two factor really helps. And I think passwords are an irony that we live with. I looked up at some point during my own sort of fraud education. Uh, where did the idea of a Unix password come from and who made it? And if you dial all the way back to the 1970s, you find out that the idea of a username had been around since the very beginning because we shared computers. And at some point or another, people realized that they needed to limit the amount of CPU and disk space and other things that each user had access to. Well, how do I not steal your CPU? So somebody said, we'll just put a password on. So when you log in, there'll be a second step where you're asked for your password. And of course, passwords are very easy to write down, they're very easy to hack and steal. And often people leave them in plain text on your computer, on a post it note, even, or they use the same password for everything because we weren't thinking about having thousands of passwords, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it wasn't really for security, it was more a lock for honest people so that you didn't use other people's CPU time on a shared terminal based computer. And here we are, a generation or two later, still relying on that password for virtually everything we do. And here's a scary thought. Most of the time on LinkedIn, when you get these messages, that person has a join date from several years back. Well, this is because it's easier to hijack existing accounts than to generate new ones because each of us has, on average, about 200 accounts that we've created and don't use. It's hard to imagine, but think about this for a sec. Think of just the last few weeks. Haven't you been invited to join some services? Maybe you got something about a new AI thing. Maybe you wanted to do an online photo generator or, something like that. Well, you go in and you sign up. Maybe you signed up to 3 of them and you decided, I don't like that. It didn't work. Well, these bad passwords and usernames that you just abandoned, a year or two later, they have the credibility of looking like an account that has been on the service for 2 years. And you look at it and your training and thinking says to yourself, oh, well, this person's been around. If they were a fraudster, they probably would have been flagged in the last 2 years, right? But in reality, that hijacked account was left over by someone who was just trying out the service 2 years ago and moved on with their life and left a terrible password on it. So, we're there creating our own dendrite of leftover pieces that we just litter the floor with them, and fraudsters pick them up, no problem, and use them against us.
Oh, you actually just highlight very well the topic that I never, yeah, probably never thought about this one. So I used to use Evernote. I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years. I have no this something like that. When it was popular, 10 years ago, something like that.
Exactly.
I tried once. I didn't find this one useful. I tried second time. I didn't find this useful, and I stopped using this one. However, I never contacted Evernote to remove my credentials, my email, and my password. So, and what you explain here, so the process, instead of create new fake email which easy to spot, They compromise dead accounts, and using these dead accounts, and from, I don't know, from machine learning perspective, if customers with us for a while and customers use service before, they probably come back customers. However, it is rarely it is real customers, because I know who using Evernote nowadays. I don't know if they even exist.
Okay, well, let's take this same paradigm and let's turn it around a little. Now, I have four small children. They're here in New York City. They go to PS 116. Now, how do I get their grades? How do I communicate with their teachers? I log on to essentially a social network. It's not public like LinkedIn, right? But my children have curated for them accounts, and they're in grade school. They also use Zoom because schools have gone to part time Zoom. They also have Roblox and a few other games. So by the time you're about five, you already have several online accounts. Now, think for a moment. These accounts are curated by the school, and when you leave the school, they are disconnected, right? This is part of the school's policy and how they manage that software. Same thing is true for the Department of Motor Vehicles. If you're looking to validate an ID online, well, that just came from a database somewhere, and as we go through our lives, we start using Friendster. Then MySpace comes along and we begin to use that. Then Facebook comes along and we begin to use that. So there is a natural, lifelong um, progression through the tools and services that we use online, but our identity remains the same, right? I am the same person. So as we grow up, we go to university, you get an MIT.edu email, right? You graduate, you go to a job, you get an IBM.com email, right? Well, these things are actually part of your digital identity and they're there for you to own and leverage. And they live and evolve alongside you as you progress through your digital life. Now, imagine if my children were to grow up with a service like TruAnon, where they can confirm and control these digital properties and leverage them to show their credibility. By the time they're getting car insurance, my children have had accounts created for them and retired for them for years and years and years and years. And you probably are aware of the highest order of confidence in uh, identity verification in the United States, anyway, comes from the FBI or the CIA. And they will come to you and interview you, and they will say, "Who was your teacher in grade school?" And they will call this person and they will say, "Do you remember, this student?" and things like that. They literally go all the way back there to make sure that you're not an ingenious plant from some foreign country trying to get a job in our FBI. Compare that now to the confidence available through a lifetime of digital properties, right? MIT doesn't give anyone an email. You must be associated with the school. Same thing with IBM. They don't just give you an email, you have to be an employee. Now, that's a really simple thing. For the people that own those credentials, this is already right at hand. You have the password, you use the property. It's, in fact, one of the links and profiles that you'd like other people to know you by, right? That's why we have blogs. That's why we like our LinkedIn, right? When we want people to know who we are online, we give them these things. So, what if I could confirm ownership of those things over my whole life? Now I get to be in my 50s and my grade school, which hasn't been accessed in 45 years, is still there, still connected. Although the connection has been retired by the school, The fact that I confirmed that account, and then the next school, and then my university, and then my work, and then my car insurance, after a little while, you have a level of digital confidence that actually is higher than that FBI craziness where they call your grade school teacher. So we started the conversation about why these fake profiles are rocking democracies and destroying our future and threatening our children and our friends. Yet the solution to this is already there. It's not in a physical ID. It's not. That doesn't work online. The same physical ID that works perfectly well for the bar downstairs, handed in at the bank. I never have any worries about that, right? We've been using physical ID for years and years. I take that same ID and I put it online. What happens? Suddenly, it's cheap to steal and it's easy to fake. And by surrendering that private document, the moment I press submit, I've transmitted the very same thing that a fraudster steals to pass the very same gate. It's like a dog chasing its own tail. I'm there trying to get, credibility, right? I want to protect myself, but in doing so, I've just surrendered the very same things that is causing the engine of this crime, right? That's the thing that people steal and then sell. So I think it's a great irony that we have spent a whole generation trying to transmogrify. It's a word that I'm sure I don't know the meaning, but I think it means something about lost in translation, right? A
Yeah.
physical object being brought into the digital world has different properties. The digital world has a different laws of physics, right? We can make endless copies of digital information forever. So the moment you put that driver's license picture online, forevermore, it can be stolen, it can be replicated, and you can't detect it. That's just the way the digital world works. So, to solve that problem, we need a purely digital solution. Trying to take physical ID online will never work.
Yeah. I mean, you probably agree with me, or maybe disagree. But nowadays, you're more afraid to lose your phone rather than lost your, I don't know, passport or ID in any public spaces. Because if you lost your passport, you know what you need to do. You just like probably going to the police, write something like getting document that you lost this document this particular day, and request another one, and you get this one after particular time.
I know where you're going with this.
However, if you lost your phone, in my mind, it's like, okay, so I remember most of the password for the most important things. I know what I do in first. Because I use the iPhone. The first things I just like move this one to the stone, just like disable my device to make sure no one getting access. And the only options for them to sell it is just sell it on the pieces. But afterwards, I gonna have a lot of issues with all my bank accounts, all my social networking, because it's gonna be brand new device. It's gonna be a new SIM card because I'm gonna request another one. They're gonna start to request me 2FA, which gonna be a lot of the trouble to replace. So in my mind, when I'm just like think for a second, the lost phone, you just lost a lot. The number of troubles and problems you have in 1 second is like increased to the thousands percent.
It's true. I'll tell you a quick story here in New York City. I lost my wallet. Okay, so not only do I have no cash, but I have none of my cards. All of that stuff. Now in New York City, you can't get on the train without at least a few bucks. So how do you even get home? The beauty of that situation was that I still had my iPhone, and even though Apple had immediately recognized that people were trying to use my credit cards, that's how I knew my phone, my wallet wasn't somewhere lost in my apartment. My phone began to show the transactions. And
Just
I was like,
vibrating
well,
as a heart. Yeah.
it's safe to say my wallet is gone. um, so every other card had to be replaced, right? I have to call the bank, go through some heavy ID verification and all that. And then they're going to mail me this thing. It takes 5 days, 10 days. I don't know, Um, Apple, on the other hand, in the digital world, they were able to regenerate the number that is behind my Apple Pay. And in 2 seconds, I could get on the train. I could even
Yeah.
pay for something at a retail store. So again, I think there is two worlds that we straddle in our modern life. One is the physical world, and the other is the digital. And all of these examples that we've just gone through are amazingly intricate examples of how these two universes have different laws of physics, right? Different realities, different, I don't know, laws. You cannot break them. The physical world, I can't show up at a bank and just be 500 of me, right? I can't just be rejected and come back and come back and come back, right? These things are not possible in the physical world. If I show up at a bank,
Yeah.
I'm one individual. If I show up at a bank, I had to get there, right? I can't open a bank in Europe right now because I'm in America. But if
Yeah.
I'm online, I can be 500 at a time. I can be any location at a time and all of those things. And what we did, I'm afraid to say, as engineers during the early days of the web, we were asked, hey, I'd love to bring my bank online, but how do you do that when people bring their ID to the bank? And we as engineers thought, well, I guess what you do is you take a picture of your ID and you send that. Seemed like a good idea at the time.
I mean,
But it
it worked
doesn't
well
work.
for a couple years.
Yes. Exactly. It was probably all fine for a little while, right? Until people figured out all I need to do is steal it or fake it. Somebody just sent me a great article recently on a piece of software where you hold up a blue card, and a green screen kind of thing, and the software will put any driver's license you want on there. And you take a picture of yourself and it puts the picture on there. And you can move it and you can smile and hold up three fingers and all those things that they try to do. So it is an interesting conundrum when we try to solve digital problems from physical world thinking, right? We think to ourselves, we live in the physical world, right? We're not really part of the digital world. The only thing that we do there is log into things and generate content, right? That's the only dent that we make in the digital world. And so to be able to leverage those pieces of our digital identity, this is the future of safety and security online. The more we think about solving digital problems using physical real world things, the more we make these mistakes. There is a translation, and this translation changes that piece of physical ID, which worked fine at the bar, right? Same thing online, it changed. And we don't think about this. So I think one of the greatest problems in fraud fighting is putting the digital hat on and developing solutions that really live and work in the digital world. And we must watch this translation between the two. So, I think it's hard to find the right solutions for a lot of these security things. We began this conversation with two-factor and multi-factor and all these other sorts of ideas. And these are very important progressions that I assume will continue. But I think the mistake that we made, largely moving online through the web, was that we imagined certain things in the physical world would simply map to that digital world and provide us the same security, the same safety, but it doesn't. And so I'll tell you a very quick story about the App Store and how it affects fraud. We don't think about the App Store as being a fraud fighting technology, but it really is. Think about.
Before you start this story, I actually just like, I believe after almost 30 minutes that we discuss, could you share a bit of your personal story? Because I believe it's this piece of information is going to be very important for your story about App Store. Because what I saw online about you is that your first company was in 1993 and it's related to App Store. Can you a bit about yourself, about your background? And after this, I believe it's going to be very useful to hear from you about App Store and examples you want to share with us.
Surely. When I was a young person, I had a lot of computer skills at an early age. My mother was an MIT professor, and I had access to computers at an age that people in my generation didn't have a lot. So by the time I was 20 or something, I had really quite a bit of computer experience. And I came to Seattle in the United States, West Coast. Couldn't quite make it to Silicon Valley. I was still young and trying to get my start. But yeah, I met my first sort of serious business partner, Peggy, who was old enough to be my mom and in a lot of ways sort of was. She was making a catalog of software for the next computer, which was Steve Jobs' kind of in between computer. Ironically, this is the same computer that the World Wide Web was invented on. So it is an extremely important computer in computer history. But because of a long story about how Apple then acquired it and how it became Mac, that story isn't often told. But this computer was probably history's greatest computer. And I was absolutely fascinated by it. And as I began to learn about how software was distributed, our mission was to allow more indie developers, smaller developers, developers without a great deal of investment to bring their products to market. This is in a day where to buy software, you had to drive to a store called Egghead and take a box off a shelf, buy it, bring it home, and install it yourself. Hard to imagine, but that's the way it was. And so what we did was DRM, or digital rights management, and we protected the rights of artists online. And so this created what was called an application storefront. I think the word app store is really from that phrase. And that meant that we had to have a physical app that binds to the machine for encryption, right? We couldn't do this
Right.
without an app. So it couldn't just be a listing of software. It couldn't just be encrypted software that you FTP. It needed to be an application storefront. So, to make a long story short, let's skip ahead, I think, 15 years or so. By the way, Steve Jobs saw that app store, and at the end of our startup runway, he decided it was something worthwhile. And so much of the app store's success happened without my being around. But that's another story about startup success and failure. The first time I saw the App Store being used, excuse me, was iTunes Music. You may remember, or older folks will remember in your audience, the music industry had recently printed its music on compact discs, right? It looks like another
Yeah.
platter, just like an LP. But this was digital music for the first time.
It
And
was
as we
horrible
were mentioning,
experience, but yeah.
copies can be made without limit and without detection forever. So, the rise of Napster. For those who don't recognize the name, just Google it and you'll see this was the music piracy machine. And it swept the industry. So much so that the industry literally thought that it may end. It was that serious, the piracy. Now, the App Store came in and changed all that, not by making the laws of the digital universe different. You cannot do that. It didn't even make the theft of software and piracy of music impossible, right? It's you could still steal music right now. In fact, I think it's even easier. Um, what did it really do? Is it provided a way that was simpler and easier, right? It made music piracy obsolete, right? It doesn't matter anymore. Music is only a buck. It's streamed, for a few bucks a month. Um, and people think that's fair and they're willing to do it because it's easier and it's reliable and it gives them exactly what they're looking for. So I think the message to fraud fighters and the world of online security isn't just be aware of when things are in the digital universe versus the physical and those differences. But there are certain types of fraud that simply cannot be magically prevented, right? There will always be bad actors who try to take advantage of things. This is just the way humans are. And the laws of the digital universe cannot be changed. So, what we need to do sometimes is make fraud obsolete, right? Make these tricks that they do to get us onto WhatsApp, to do these other things, to provide accountability and give tools to the legitimate so that you and I can show each other that we are just there with the common expectation of meeting other good people, right? And if we could differentiate that, then we have a safer world.
Have you ever been victim of fraud?
Have I what?
Have you ever been victim of fraud?
Well, certainly. I have not had, serious financial draws. My wife
That's great.
situation was
That's really great.
worse. Um, but I'll tell you, for a little while in my fraud investigation, I began to respond to some of those LinkedIn messages that you probably are educated and perceptive enough to simply not respond to. I wondered, what happens if you say, "Hi, sure, I will give you my WhatsApp," or whatever? um, and two things happen. One is that you get a lot more of them, which means these people are connected. You're suddenly on a list of suckers, right? Um, and the routes that they wanted to bring me down, which I didn't go too far down, but were different. And I could see that this was a deep mechanism of well organized crime, not just, some fat kid in a couch somewhere. These were real thinking professionals who are probably driving fancy cars based on the number of frauds that they're able to create. Here in New York City, it's very funny. Older apartments all have on the bottom floors metal cages to prevent people from breaking into your apartment. And when I was young, it was pretty common in New York City that people would try to break into your apartment. And today, if you look for apartments in New York and they still have cages on the window, the realtor will tell you, if you'd like, just ask and we'll have those removed. And I said to somebody, gosh, what has everybody in New York suddenly become, nice? What happened to all the criminals that live here? And she said, I don't know, but I don't think there's any value in climbing up a fire escape where everybody can see you and trying to break into a window so that you could steal the probably nothing that's in somebody's apartment. You'll get caught and you'll get put in jail. Compare that to the person who ripped off my wife. He got $3,500. You're probably not going to find that in an apartment. Not today, maybe. But you probably go to jail. Now, he knows Venmo's privacy policy. Venmo will not give out his identity. Okay? It's just the way it is. And he knows
Yeah.
how to get his suckers onto the right tools and technologies. Telegram may be one, WhatsApp may be one. Um, and if you look into it, you find that each of these things has a privacy policy that mistakenly protects the fraudster. These companies don't wake up every day and think to themselves, how can I help fraudsters? Right? Nobody works at Craigslist wants to code a website where people are raped and murdered. These are serious crimes that people are serious about. And the problem is that we're confused online. We don't know how to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe. So the answer to your question is sure, I've been a victim of fraud. We all have been a victim of fraud, whether or not you've lost money or not. When I engaged with those people, even just a little bit, I gave them money. They harvested my private details and they sold them. The evidence of that is the number of more people that came to ask me about that thing. Now, where did they hear about me? Right? So when you engage with these folks, you're already lost. You've already given them something that they can sell, your private information. And that's the first line of defense, is folks who are there to make a bit of money by turning you over quickly to a higher grade fraudster. Now, if you're from a dating site, they're going to send you to some pretty mean fraudsters. Okay. Romance fraud has some of the most humiliating and gruesome extortion that happens on the internet. And so, even though you're here on LinkedIn, you may find that by interacting with one of these people, you have put together the final piece in their database of legitimate people to target. And now they have the third part, and suddenly you're a valuable bit of information to sell. And where do they sell it? To the meanest person who's got the worst intentions. So this whole business has been created to fleece us. And the reason why people don't break into the windows of New York apartments is because they're better off staying in their own apartment than going online. You know, so that's where you want to do crime, and maybe it's reduced the number of police work that we have to do in our society. But the fact is that every one of us is being attacked. And even when you are attacked, if you respond at all, you get one of those random text messages saying, hey, do you want to meet at the diner? And you're thinking, who is this? Right? Once you said, who is this? That person then sold your information, and that's that. So it is so easy. All we have to do is blink an eye, and we're making money for fraudsters who are selling our stuff. It's absolutely infuriating.
So the best advice from all what I'm here right now, that's the best you can do is just do nothing. Because if you reply, if you watch, if you read, and it's signed that you read message, you read email, or something like that happens,
Mm-hmm.
that's mean you still active, you
Exactly.
still real, and it's good point to just like abuse you as more as you can.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, that's of course, it's one of the advices I got long time ago when I started using my Gmail. If you see in a spam message that looks bad, the best you can do just delete it without reading. Even if you open it and some of the images uploaded, and you believe, oh, if I'm not replying, I'm not doing anything, you still can get a signal for people who behind these emails that's okay, this email was opened because some of the images was downloaded via Gmail, and they know this exists, and they can start to target you. Yeah, that's still valid point.
It's a
You
very
know,
sophisticated system, isn't it? They
yeah.
what they know is they know three things about you, and they need the fourth to make your private data worth something, right? To harvest and sell. So they fish you. And you're right. All you had to do was graze by that email, and boom, now they know you're real. you're attentive, and all of these things. So suddenly it went from a valueless series of small data points, right? They already had enough information to contact you, right? But they wanted something more, didn't they? Right? And the moment you just touched that email, you gave it to them and they sold it. Now, you didn't realize you suffered a loss of privacy. You don't feel a victim, but you were. You just put a few pennies, a few dollars into somebody's bank account who is making a living off fraud. And that in itself is a terrible thing. You've contributed to fraud by reading your email. What kind of world have we made?
I would say, yeah, it's what happens in these new AI and all these kind of things. It's going to be even more scary. However, I believe we are in a moment when awareness about these kind of things increase. That's a positive trend. Yeah, it's a start to see more messages from your banks, from your some accounts that's please not share, and the people start to be more aware of this problem rather than 5 years ago no one speak about it.
Right.
No one told you that you think first before you do something. Nowadays it's a lot information. It's thousands of publications. Here in London it's billboards on a train station to say call it if you see something went wrong. It's became very popular programs for political perspective. I believe they're going to use this one for promote themselves, but I hope it's going to be help someone to be more secure and take a bit more control about the personal data, and maybe educate new generation who I don't know what to expect. If I don't have TikTok account, but friends of mine show me that people share their everything, their IDs, where they live, what kind of devices they use, and how, when and why they bought this one. And no one even realized that you give so much information about yourself, and it's going to be easy to replicate your own profile and using everywhere. You just like gives it's exactly as you write it down everything on the paper, send it over to some person.
I know. Yeah, I feel awful because our everyday activities are resulting in this. And, the thing about that story with my wife is I realized that when we had met 25 years ago or something, these were like pickpocket level crimes, right? And haven't
Yeah,
they grown up? Fake profiles are rocking democracies. This is the most serious kind of violation of our civilization that we have faced. It is pervasive and global. And it is absolutely infuriating to me. And I think it's an irony that things like LinkedIn, right? We might think of this as a very secure site. They offer verify for free. I don't, depends where you live. But here in the US, we usually get two options to verify, but they're classic verifications where you need to surrender some private information. But let's say that you go through that invasive process and their review decides that you are who you say. Well, okay, great. That allows you to look at my profile and you say, oh, well, they went through this invasive process. I don't really know what it is or whatever, but I figure you're probably the person who you say. But how does it help me identify fake and dangerous profiles of other people? Right? It doesn't do any of that. Everyone would have to surrender their private documents before that starts to make outliers of people. But imagine the same in reverse. Turn the tables. What if instead of I surrendering private documents for you to review, what if instead I take those digital properties that I already have, right? My MIT email, my LinkedIn, my blog. I'm an engineer. I have a GitHub account. Now, there's a profile on your GitHub account. You don't really show it off on dating sites much. I mean, depends what kind of dating site you're on.
Yeah, it depends who you
I
try to
want
find
that
on.
dating site.
Think about it. It's so many options right now. It's gonna be another startup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've just come up with a new one right here, the dating for engineers. But the truth is that think about that GitHub site for profile for a moment. It may be boring as a rock, but on the other hand, it's got 15 years of my checking code in and out of other people's repositories. It is very unlikely that that isn't my account, you know. It is profoundly genuine. So, what if we were able to take these digital properties and simply tabulate them? I want to make these things publicly visible. My identity, I'm going to take the links and profiles that I want other people to know me by, and I'm going to confirm that I actually own them. Now, when you come across another profile in LinkedIn, you might ask yourself, boy, you just spent 20 minutes writing me this long letter about how I should buy your Nigerian oil. Um, and if that's not enough of a tip for you, you just look at the profile and naturally, without instruction, without study, I can see that profile and I just ignore it, right? Because it's plain to me that I just spent 10 minutes confirming enough so you could see me as credible. Why did you spend 20 minutes writing me a letter that seems spammy without bothering to confirm yourself? And in this way, outliers become more and more apparent, and credible people share the benefit of being more so. And if you go back to that FBI arrangement we were talking about, it doesn't take a lot for me to confirm digital things before I have enough credibility to be about the same as surrendering my license, which we know is cheap to steal and easy to fake. But I could keep going, right? I mean, I could get my DMV account, I can get my GitHub account, I can get my weblog, my Twitter, and these living digital footprints evolve right alongside me as I go from grade school into my adult life. I'm still using these digital properties, and many of them are curated for me. Fraudsters don't have access to those things. So, what if I confirm a bunch of these and then set some privacy about how other people could view and share my identity? I could achieve a level of confidence that is well above anything that you could do with a physical ID if I want, if it helps me. And for a fraudster, they look at the same thing and they see only risk. If they've stolen or hacked a bunch of hijacked some accounts or whatever, if they put them through TruAnon, not only will they have to publicly proclaim that they've stolen these things, but the owners of those things might very well notice, and they are better off not doing it. So if they try, the best rank and score they ever get is cautioned, and they fall down to dangerous very quickly. Whereas if you and I spent 2 minutes taking the simple things, your university or work email, just a handful of things, things you already have, things you're using now. These things have a depth of interconnections that we can tabulate and reflect that confidence that you are probably who you say, and we can achieve a much higher level. So, credible people share this benefit, right? We all want to be more credible on LinkedIn. We want people to believe us and know who we are. And so,
Yep.
it would, if LinkedIn were to offer that sort of verify, it would entirely change their community immediately, because without instruction and without study, I could come by your profile and ignore it. Right? And on the other hand, if you're clearly who you say, I can see This person has a rank and score of 4.1 out of 5 that says, yeah, that's Jesse. He lives in New York. He's a Leo and his age range is 45 to 55 or whatever it is. These simple things can allow me to have a post on Craigslist. And I'm not giving away my identity. You can't stalk me. You can't find Jesse in New York, blah, 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 right, from that information. But because it has been tabulated and given a 4.1 out of 5 score, that's a very genuine profile behind that post. And that means it's not a fraudster maintaining thousands, right? Because you can't do that. Properties can have only one owner. So I can't just return if someone bans me. And in fact, legitimate people are the only ones who can make easy use of this. It's harder for the fraudster. And this brings us right back to the iTunes example, right? If you make it harder for the fraudster and easier for the legitimate, the fraudster moves on to less secure platforms. Maybe they go from breaking into Windows to, using online services. Whatever they're going to do, I'm sorry, I can't change fraudsters in the world. But I can make it economically impractical for them to use your service to abuse people. And that's, I think, the key to this pervasive problem of fake profiles.
I agree with you. I'm actually found information share very fascinating and very interesting, and I believe we are on the way. I hope we are on the way how we're going to use this non-physical information and applying. I believe it's just a matter of time, and I see a lot of companies trying to apply new approaches and force people to start using more and more digital information rather than personal information.
Exactly.
I believe we almost about wrap up. However, I always leave it time for people to share with my audience any type of projects or work you might working right now and you want to share with people and people might want to check out. So it's a great time if you have any projects or something. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, sure. In fact, the service that I'm referring to here is called TruAnon. That's not QAnon, it's the opposite. That is, you might think of it as anti fake profile software. It's an API, you make it part of your service. So if there are folks in your audience who maintain dating sites or pure marketplaces, maybe cryptocurrency exchange, this has the capacity to eliminate a great deal of fraud without adding friction. And it just so happens if folks in your audience would mention this podcast, you can go to truanon.com and there's a get page. And you're welcome to come and sign up a 30-minute demo slot if you mention this podcast. I personally will pick up that call and I would be glad to help you out. We have a few uh, deals in mind for folks who are just getting started. And so if you have heard about us through the podcast, we'd be glad to help you out.
Oh, so kind of you. And I'm gonna leave the link to this page, checkout page, or the description of episode of our platform. Please, doesn't matter what platform you listen or watch right now. It's gonna be in description. Take a time, have a look. I believe we need more and more technology in this industry, because only technology proof like motivate changes and force innovation.
Exactly right. So let's try to make the world a safer place, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much. It was a really interesting conversation. I'm glad to hear all the information, like how it was, how we actually password was introduced, and your story from your background, like about like App Store. It was really interesting, and it was a pleasure to invite you and speak with you today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope your audience will enjoy.
I hope too, and I believe they will. And I'm gonna say word which I'm using to end of each of the podcast, which is cut.